So we're here today with two writers and residents who have visited us from Guyana. We have Scott Tingaki and Kevin Garberan.
So today we're going to just talk a little bit about Martin Carter. Martin Carter was a renowned poet. He was one of the first Guyanese poets to gain international recognition. In addition to his career as a poet, he was also a politician, and he once served as the Minister of Information of the country as well. And when you read his works, you will find that they're charged with a lot of political and sociological energy because he's pulling from those other aspects of himself.
So whenever I think of Martin Carter, I always think of his famous poem, "This Is a Dark Time, My Love," because it's relevant. It's relevant today as much as it was 65 years ago when he wrote it. It's weird to see that the problems he faced more than 6 decades ago, we're still facing them today as Guyanese. And one of the lines that actually stick out to me every time I read it, I actually have it here on my phone, is it is a festival of guns, the carnival of misery. And given the current political situation in Guyana, I literally seen this line in the streets of Guyana, and it really is a dark time, and the poem touches me on so many levels whenever I read it.
For me, Martin Carter is not only the person who talks about the terror and the time, which is one of his phrases. He is someone who listens to the land. He listens to the tongueless whispering of the unremembered or the unnamed but remembered dead of history. But he also promises that he will always be speaking with us. He talks about dreaming to change the world and about green, green love. And we are gathered here in Queen's Park, Savannah during the coronavirus pandemic when our civil liberties are being curtailed. And I am hoping we can work towards an inward freedom and the restoration of normal living once it is contained, and also stand in solidarity with our region, which is undergoing upheavals of the political sort, not only in Guyana but in our neighboring Venezuela.
Okay, so I'm Muli Amaye, and I'm the coordinator of the MFA in Creative Writing at the UWI St. Augustine. And I just wanted to ask our two writers here, we've spoken to Vanya already, so I'm not ignoring her. In the current times, having just read this Martin Carter poem, in current times, what does it mean for you and your writing, for what's going on, for what has gone on? How does it feed into your writing?
For me, I tend to focus more on normal life, village life. But the thing is, what has happened recently, it was like we were sweeping so much under the rug, and we were living in a society where we thought that to some extent we had moved past the sort of racial tensions and violence that has happened in the past. But what has happened is that someone has lifted that rug. We all have helped in lifting that rug, and we have a mess to clean up now, and it has infiltrated every facet of Guyanese life. There's no escaping it now, and as much as I tried to not make race something I wanted to tackle, because I kind of naively believe that we're past that, it's something that I have to focus on now, because it's down to the level of the normal village life that I grew up in, that I so cherish. It's there. It's everywhere. The divisiveness that politics and race has wreaked across the nation, and there's no escaping it, and it it will inform my writing going forward from here. I'm still trying to process everything that has happened since March the 2nd. It's still fresh in my mind, and I'm still trying to process, and it may take years for us to, as a nation, to heal. Years, maybe even decades. So it's ongoing.
Well, for me, as a writer, I focus more on fantasy, but what I often do, I would pull a lot from history. So, like Derek Walcott, I rely heavily on the muse of history. And before elections happened, I was actually commissioned to write a chapter for a book. It was a book on the presidents of Guyana, and I was asked to write a chapter on our first head of state, who was Chinese Guyanese as well, Arthur Chong. And that was my first time ever experiencing or ever researching anything in terms of politics. And what I found is that it was extremely difficult to find anything by him because he was before any of these major parties existed. So there's not much in terms of archive and speeches really preserved by him. But I did find a few, and one constant idea he kept repeating in his speeches, it was the idea that with independence, it is now necessary for Guyanese of all sectors to create their own way of life, where we do not completely forsake our past, where we do not completely forsake our traditions and our culture, but we find a way to mingle them all together to create something that is distinctly Guyanese. And from that moment, we attempted to do that. But with the recent developments of the election, it appears as though all of that would be unraveling. However, I may be naive in thinking this way, but it's, if you were to look at nature and the way how cycle works with nature, even William Butler Yeats, in one of his poems, I think it was Swans at Cooley, he talks about the necessity of there being a circle and a cycle. And one of those important cycles for the universe to work is that of war and peace, where each must birth the other, and with that birth it brings the death of the other. And I guess it's just that time has come for that part of the cycle to appear. And if we were to look at Guyanese history, we have had that. And it's just that time the cycle come again, and it's just that it's now our time as writers to chronicle it somehow, if not directly, indirectly in our works. It will appear, and not only in writers in terms of creative writing, but in terms of journalism, in terms of political speeches, all of those writings will now be birthed and be chronicled at the archives at this time. And let's say 50, 60, 100 years from now, you're going to have history students looking back at this, maybe even this very video.